It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome. It is the Jill on Money show. We are so glad that you are joining us this weekend, the first weekend of August, which I am finding hard to actually say out loud, but there, I've said it. We are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios, Capital One. This is Banking Reimagined. What's in your wallet? And hey, listen, you better go check those Capital One interest rates. They might be a little bit higher than your run-of-the-mill interest rates, which are still stuck at zero after the Federal Reserve maintained interest rates at exactly zero. So, time to try to find some higher yielding interest in checking and savings account. You may want to check out our sponsor, Capital One, among all the others that are out there. If you have a financial question, we would love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com, askjill@jillonmoney.com. All right, let's do this email. This is from Rick. Okay. This is funny. I sent an email to the Jill on Money address back in May, but 2 months later, I worried it may have wound up in a spam folder or become lost bouncing around the World Wide Web. So I'm resending this through your website. Okay, here we go. Hello, Jill and Mark. Thank you for taking the time to read my email. I'm a loyal listener to both your weekly radio show and the daily podcast. I would appreciate your opinion on my, quote, good problem to have. I apologize in advance for the length. Oh, come on. No apologies, gang. Just send me all this stuff. All right. So I'm 66. My wife is 64. We retired about 2.5 years ago. Our net worth today is approximately, wait for it, gang, $4.6 million. We have no debt, no mortgage, and no children, which brings me to my question. What to do with the pension from my last employer? With no heirs, we decided to give our entire estate to my college alma mater to create a scholarship fund. We wanted to leave behind a living memorial to help make the world a better place. That's so nice. Current assets, retirement, $1.2 million. Brokerage, $1.5 million. Cash equivalents, $1.4 million. House value, $350,000. Non-qualified annuity, $129,000. Pension from next to last employer is $6,000 a year. Okay. So we've identified and put down a deposit at a continuing care community. That's interesting, by the way. Those things are rather, I'm always intrigued to see how those work out. Okay, we expect to move in about 8 years from now. I estimate spending about $65,000 a year to live there with 2 to 3% annual increases. Okay. Let's see. Their monthly medical and supplemental health, $20,000 a year. They've got long-term care insurance by age 70. Look, they got plenty of money. So let's be clear about that. Okay. At age 70, here's the real question. He can collect either an additional $45,000 a year, not indexed to inflation, or a $777,000 lump sum. We've discussed the following options with our financial advisor. Take the pension payments. There'll be nothing left from this holding for the scholarship fund after our deaths, but we have the guaranteed lifetime income. Transfer the lump sum to a self-directed balanced IRA at Fidelity, 3% withdrawal, $23,000 a year. Transfer the lump sum to a bond or stock-based annuity. Our first priority is covering future income needs, but we also want to leave as much of a legacy as possible. I'm leaning toward the more stable bond-based annuity since it would give us guaranteed retirement income with the potential of additional scholarship funding. However, I heard you speak often about how much you like guaranteed pension income, so I wanted to get your feedback before pulling the trigger. Many thanks to you and Mark for your hard work. This is Rick in North Carolina. Mark, what would you like to do with this? What option would you like to choose? 1, 2, or 3? All right. Mark wants to do either take the pension payments or just do the lump sum to a self directed IRA. Uh, I'll tell you what I think. I think just collect the 45 grand a year. That's it. That's all I think. I think that this is an easy one. And that will basically cover everything you need. And who cares? And I don't think that's a problem. I just think I like the guarantee. I like having the stream of income. And you're going to give plenty of money to your legacy. So I don't know. I want to take the guarantee of the income and call it a day. That's it. That's kind of where I stand because I just don't see, I don't know why you would really want to do anything beyond that, really. It just seems to me it's a much easier way to project out what you actually will be able to use. And I think that makes most sense for you. Okay. Question. Is this advisor crazy? This is from Jessica. A friend of mine who is getting ripped off for years with a financial advisor who charged high fees and commissions and put him into big front end load products and other crazy stuff eventually took my advice and found a fee only fiduciary advisor. Okay, that's good. He's had this new person for 3 years, but my friend just sent me his latest statement asking, is this normal? So I'm asking the only people I trust, you and Mark. Okay, the advisor is fee based, takes 1% on the first $500,000 of assets under management, 0.8% on the portion between 500,000 and the 737,000 he has. He's using the Schwab platform. Can you say if any of these things are normal? My friend is 58. Okay. He took control of my friend's 401k with his corporate login and password, as well as other IRAs at other brokerages. Um, a lot of companies will do this and some won't. It is so that it's not unheard of. There are some advisors who think this is probably sort of in the gray area. But then again, if your friend knew it and he gave the password and he did all that, then that's not abnormal. So I wouldn't say it's normal, but it's not abnormal. Here's the second thing. He encouraged my friend to put his emergency fund into a Schwab account, taking a percentage of that cash just sitting there. Oh, he had about 100,000 in the Marcus savings account put there when Marcus was a sponsor of your podcast. I don't love that idea. I think that an advisor would, that's not normal. I think that if it's your emergency reserve fund, if they're just holding it for you because they can get you a better rate, then I don't think that should be charged a asset management fee. Otherwise, I would just leave it alone. There's a few other things that's going on that I want to get to, but we have to take a break first. So when we come back, we're going to talk about what is normal, what is not normal from Jessica. And during the break, what I encourage you all to do is to go to our website, jillonmoney.com. That's jillonmoney.com. And there you can check out all the cool stuff we do. You can watch the television segments that I've done. You can check out our resource section. I can't wait. We're going to have to rejigger the resource section when this next round of stimulus comes out, because there will be another round, gang. I just don't know what it's going to be yet. So it's Jill on Money. If you've got a question, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the program that attempts to take the mystery out of your financial life. And before we went to the break, we had a great question that came in. I love when people basically write in on their friend's behalf, but this is Jessica writing on behalf of her friend who had a bunch of questions about her friend's investment advisor. First, is it legit or normal to have an advisor manage someone's 401k? And I think that this is a little bit of as long as the paperwork is in place, as long as everything's being fully disclosed, I think that's fine. Putting an emergency reserve fund in an account under management and charging a fee on that, I think that's not cool. Now, the next part of this is the friend has 31 grand in the Highland Merger Arbitrage Fund, and it has an expense ratio of what Jessica calls a whopping 4.26%. Is that possible, Mark? Is that even I mean, hold on. I want to look this up right now just because I can't. I mean, oh my God. Okay. Let's just see here. Maybe I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that this is perhaps a misread. Okay. So I have here, I'm looking it up. Key statistics, expense ratio, 4.61%, Mark. I'm looking at it. That's not just pricey, that's insanity. So that's crazy. So I would not do that. And actually, if there's some reason to have that, because maybe this is like a very, it's like maybe, oh, I'm giving you this really cool hedge fund type of investment, then that would have to be pulled out of the asset under management model, and it would have to really be discussed. And here's the last one. He's invested $70,000 of my friend's money in options and short options, puts, calls for individual stocks. That's just a start. Okay. I don't like this at all. I don't like this at all, Mark. I'm feeling I don't like it. I'm feeling like this is not a I don't want to say that this sounds shady. It sounds like not appropriate for this person. So, Jessica, here's what I'd love for you to do. I want you to play this clip for your friend, and I want you to encourage your friend to give us a holler, and hopefully we can try to dismantle what has been put in place and see if we can help this guy out. Jessica writes, thank you for taking a look. I love your pod and all that you teach. Thank you both for all you do. Thank you for reminding me to lift people up every day, Jessica. That's what we do on the podcast. I do it here on the radio show also. But if you want to, by the way, check out the podcast, do so. You can just go to jillonmoney.com, our website, and you can subscribe. Subscribe to our wonderful podcast. We put it out daily because we are gluttons. We love you and we're gluttons. Okay, Melissa writes, question about where to invest proceeds from a house sale. Okay. Melissa says they're selling a house after purchasing the replacement home for cash, and they're going to have 250 grand left over to invest. That's amazing. Here's the background. Melissa writes, we have about $650,000 in retirement and taxable accounts, $100,000 in cash. That cash would cover 18 months of living expenses. That's good. No debt. The new property is $500,000 and we're paying for it in cash. Great. We're comfortable with the ups and downs of the market, but we feel more conservative about the remaining $250,000 because it is the culmination of 30 years and, ready for this, 7 houses. Whew, okay. My plan is to put it in an ultra short term bond fund and dollar cost average about 3/4 of it into low volatility exchange traded funds over the course of 18 months or so. My husband thinks it's too risky. We're 55 and 58. He will partially retire by age 60. I'll be working for 10 to 15 more years. I keep thinking that keeping $250,000 in a money market fund is just too conservative at our age. What do you think? Well, Melissa, I'll tell you what I think. I think that I'm sort of in your camp. What I don't know is what your real needs are. So there's two ways to look at retirement planning. One is to say, let's look forward and see how much money we will need to generate out of our portfolio when we retire. And if you can easily handle that with your current allocation, and it's just maybe a 3% withdrawal rate or a 3.5% if you want to be a little more aggressive, well then okay. But, your husband might have a point if you find that you've got so much money that taking risks just doesn't matter. So I am fine in your game plan, but I think this does require a little bit more thought as to what exactly you need your money to do for you. So I would encourage you to run a retirement plan, and then you and your husband can get on the same page and try to, allay some of his fears, and maybe from your perspective, um, not convince him, but bring him along on the idea that a diversified portfolio would make a lot of sense. So let's try that out. Okay, next. This is from Kevin. Kevin is 68 years old, and he says, I hold my savings at two major institutions. It is extremely important that we safeguard our assets, as this is for retirement and it cannot be replaced. At this point in my life, it would be easier to have all of our savings at one institution, especially for my spouse if something were to happen to me. However, I've not done so, as I'm apprehensive to put all of our eggs in one basket, and this is for security reasons. It's especially true in today's environment of hacking. I employed two-step verification and security questions. That being said, please comment on using one major institution to hold 100% of our retirement savings. Again, using one would be easier for required minimum distributions and for my spouse to handle. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, chill out. Don't worry about it. I mean, even if there were a real problem with security, that security and that breach would be covered by the institution. It's not as if, I'm going to make this up. Let's pretend that the two institutions are, say, Bank of America and UBS. And, if either of them were hacked, you would be made whole on anything. I don't see this being a big issue. I do see a bigger issue in that it's a pain in the neck to manage two different accounts. And as you said, it's a pain in the neck for the spouse who actually doesn't really like managing those things. So I say go ahead, combine them. And, if there's any issue and I'm missing something, please feel free to follow up with me. Okay, this is from Kenyetta, who says, I'm currently renting a townhouse in Maryland and I want to purchase the home this year. However, my name is still on a house loan with my ex-wife. I don't live in the previous home, nor do I have any financial responsibility for the home. Would I be approved for a new home loan? My credit scores are in the 700s. Now, here's the problem. You might be able to qualify for a new loan, but why is your name still on this mortgage? I mean, so even if you don't have any financial responsibility for the home on an ongoing basis, if your ex-wife like flaked out on you, then you would be responsible for it. And so I think you'll have to go through the process. You'll have to see if you qualify, but unfortunately, your name's still on that loan. That is still a liability for you, and the mortgage company is going to look at it. So I would encourage your ex-wife to refinance that loan and get you off that document ASAP. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money, and during the break, here's what you ought to do. Go to the website, jillonmoney.com. Sign up for our free weekly newsletter. It's free. Comes out every week. Fantastic, right? Okay. When we return, more of your questions. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you have a financial question, just give us a shout. The email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. That's askjill@jillonmoney.com. Things are much better over here in Jill on Money land. You know why? Because I put my glasses on. I can see now, so I can read these emails much more clearly. So that's good. Other big news here. Mark finally sold his Bitcoin. So he basically broke even on it. When did you buy the Bitcoin, Mark? It had to be more than that. It had to be 2 years or yeah, we interviewed that guy about Bitcoin. It was, I think, the end of 2018 when we interviewed him. So even though you held on to it and broke even, what was the opportunity cost on that, Mark? Yeah, missed out on a great year and you wasted your time worrying about it. Not that you worried about it, because I know it wasn't like something that was like a huge priority, but you really proved the point, which is stay out of that nonsense, right? I mean, really. All right, now let us get back to you. And if you would like to get in touch with us, go to our website, jillonmoney.com. And all you need to do is click the contact button. It's in the upper right hand corner. Georgine writes, what to do with our stocks? Okay. Hi, Jill. We love to hear you on CBS about finances. We trust your opinion. My husband and I are retired. We're in our 70s. We have great stocks that provide great dividends. Kellogg, Pfizer, AT&T, Merck, etc., about a dozen of them. We've had about 74% of our money in stocks, the rest in bonds or mutual funds. We are nervous as we had two experts from two different investment firms say that all of our stocks are good. Should we continue what we are doing or should we unload more into bonds for protection for the next 2 years? We trust what you think is going to happen in the economy. Thank you so much for responding. Okay, Georgine, here's a question that I have for you. As you've gone through the last, let's say few years, how has it felt when you guys experienced a downturn? Because if you feel like these downturns are harder and harder to take, then you may want to skinny up these positions. At the very least, I think being 75% in stocks is just, it's a lot of risk. Now, maybe you've got other sources of income. Maybe you've got Social Security and pensions, and the dividends that these stocks are providing are, just sort of icing on the cake. I don't know. I don't want you to think, I don't want to market time on your behalf. But what I do think is that you should be really considering how the market volatility has impacted you. And if you feel like you're fine with it, then maybe it's fine. I mean, these are good stocks and it's like having your own, it's essentially like having your own mutual fund, having a dozen stocks, right? But I don't know how much you have and what we need to rely on to generate income. So a little more information would be great. I'm a big wimp, so frankly, I gotta say, 75% in stocks, no, thank you. Okay. Susan writes, can I roll over a 401k in the amount of $5,000 to an investment place called Royalty Pharma Inc.? I don't know anything about Royalty Pharma Inc. One, it sounds to me like it's one stock, so I wouldn't do that. What you should be doing is rolling over an old 401k into an IRA rollover and using cheap index funds. That would be my suggestion. I'm so boring today, Mark. Really? Okay, Cindy writes, thanks for all you do on educating the public on financial matters. I listen every day. I always feel empowered by your podcast. I'm a single public school teacher at the high school level in Ohio. They've revamped our state retirement system. And now full retirement is defined as 60 years old with 35 years of service. At that point, one would receive 77% of one's salary. And Cindy also adds, most teachers won't reach 60 years old until they've had 38 years. And when I started teaching in Ohio, you could retire with 30 years and have 66% of your salary as a pension. Okay, so these are big changes. Cindy's 46. She says, I have 24 years of service. I don't think I can be on the top of my game and do my students justice if I work in the classroom until I'm 60. I fear burnout and the mundane routine of working in the same job for 38 years. Yeah, I mean, come on, that's a lot, right? Especially in the classroom. I've invested heavily in a Roth for years. I currently have $155,000 and another $40,000 in brokerage accounts. I have been disgruntled in the 403B options that our district offers because of the high fees. I would like to work 6 or 7 more years so I could obtain 40% of my salary as an early pension. And then I'll have my investments in my Roth and brokerage accounts to help maintain my finances. Lately, I've been thinking about opening a short term fixed income 457 plan. My thinking is I could have access to my 457 money before I turn 59 and a half without any penalties and just have to pay taxes on the money I take out of the 457. Perhaps this would help me decrease my taxable income and be a win win for the present and the future. Is this a logical thought? Thank you for any and all thoughts on the decision. Planning for the future isn't always fun, but definitely can help in the long run. I look forward to hearing your advice. Cindy, who signs it as teacher from Ohio. This is a tough one. I understand that teaching's tough. I do get that. But what would you do after working for 6 or 7 more years? Let's say it's 7 years, right? Let's say you're 53 years old. You're going to try to retire when you're 53. You're going to have 40 more years of retirement to fund. I don't think you're going to make it on that. Is it the game plan that you retire in 6 or 7 years and then do something else? I can't run these numbers for you, without understanding what your expenses are, but I can just tell you that people who retire in their early 50s are really facing a very steep challenge. And I know you may not want to work in the classroom until you're 60, but maybe at least till 55. I mean, you can use a 457 plan, that's fine. But more importantly, I think we've got to hone in on this retirement age. And then we've got to really run the numbers, see what you need, and then we can get to you. All right, we got to go to a break. Mark's bugging me. Okay, Jill on Money. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, she's all over the place. Go to jillonmoney.com to find it all. Now back to the show with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here to help you through these very scary times, health-wise, scary times in terms of the economy, not so scary in terms of the investment markets, which seem, financial markets seem pretty strong right now. That said, if you have a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. That is askjill@jillonmoney.com. Michelle writes, the subject: when is a bonus not a bonus? Okay, here's the note. Hi, Jill. Love the podcast. I find it a bright spot in this crazy time. Thanks for sharing the great info every day. Okay, this is what Michelle writes. I started a position in a new company a year ago and understood I would get a guaranteed bonus at the end of my first year. That time has come along with an email asking me to sign a promissory note to receive my expected funds. Okay, in reading the details, it looks like a loan versus a signing bonus that will be forgiven over 5 years, 20% each year. If I leave the firm or I am fired for cause, I have to pay back the unforgiven amount immediately plus 10% interest. If I'm laid off, the loan is forgiven. The amount is $125,000. I haven't signed this, and I'm not sure that I should. I don't need a loan. I hate the idea of feeling like an indentured servant. I also don't expect the market will pay me 10% returns in the next year or so, and can imagine I might want to stop working in this role at some point before the 5 years have passed. I am 62. I'm thinking of saying thanks but no thanks, which likely flags me as a retention risk. My colleagues say I'm nuts. What is your perspective, Michelle? This is interesting. First of all, I think it's a weird thing that you're supposed to get a guaranteed bonus at the end of the first year, and now it's not. So I think what I would do, just because I'm this kind of gal, is I would go back to the person who hired you and said, I was not clear. I thought this was a guaranteed bonus. And can you help me play dumb and ask them to explain the details? And maybe there is something they can do, and maybe you can negotiate. You might say, "Hey, look, I don't like this." You can say the exact you don't say indentured servant, but I feel like that's a weird thing. Is there a signing bonus that you would be able to provide me that is essentially just a bonus? Maybe you should just take the 20% right now up front this year, and that's that. And so I don't know. I think this is a strange thing. Maybe you want to get to 25 grand and be done with it. The other idea would be to talk to an attorney, an employment lawyer, who can then help you understand and negotiate this bonus or so-called bonus. It's a strange situation, and I do feel like it's a little bit weird that they call it a signing bonus and then this thing comes to you and it looks very different. So, in my experience, a signing bonus is a bonus and you get paid no matter what, and it is a guarantee. And so the fact that they pop this in your lap right now, doesn't feel great. I don't like that. Yeah, it's like Mark says it's like getting almost like a stock incentive plan with a vesting schedule. That's not a signing bonus. Those are two different things. And I'm sure that if it were framed in that way from the beginning, you might feel very differently like, okay, fine. But it's not a signing bonus. So I think that you should get a second opinion from an employment lawyer and also go back and just play dumb a little bit and say, "Hey, I don't really get this." Okay, here is a question from Sterling, who enjoys our podcast and says, "It gives me a different outlook on my finances. I just became a father. I want the best for my little girl. What are some investment options besides the 529 plan for children? I'm asking just in case she decides she doesn't want to go to college." Well, first of all, most 529 plans can also be used for private high school as well. So that's number one. Number two, the other piece of this would be, what are your other options? Depends a little bit on your situation because there are Coverdell IRAs, which are for kids. You could just open an investment account for your kid. I'd have to know a little bit more about your situation, but most importantly, I would say this. If you don't have the ducks in a row for your own financial life, I don't want you to worry about what's going on for your kid. In other words, you need to have certain steps in place. What are those steps? Those steps include having zero credit card debt, having and consumer debt, having that delicious emergency reserve fund of 6 to 12 months of your expenses in a safe place. And finally, it would be maxing out your retirement account. So, have you done all those things before we start saving for that little baby girl? Let me know. Okay. Thanks for writing. Okay. You are listening to Jill on Money. And if you would like to, wouldn't you like to be on top of this like everyone else who's written today? Why don't you subscribe to our podcast? It is called Jill on Money, and you can get it on Apple and Stitcher and Spotify and radio.com, Google Play. Just do it. Then you'll hear us every single day. You won't miss a day. It will be like nothing good. No day goes by that you won't hear my dulcet tones. Okay, we'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. We are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios. Capital One, this is Banking Reimagined. What's in your wallet? And we've got one little segment here before we go to a break and get prepared for a fantastic second hour guest. It is Cal Newport, who I actually called Cam Newton as we were trying to get ready to do this segment. but he's not. It's not Cam Newton, although I'd like to interview him too. It's Cal Newport. All right, let's get to your questions. Eric says he loves the daily podcast. He says, my wife and I are in a position to make after-tax contributions to her 401k and then roll them into her Roth IRA. This is known as a mega backdoor Roth, by the way. And the question is, do I endorse this strategy? Are there any downsides? Eric, I love this strategy. This is a fantastic way to get the sort of supercharge your retirement savings. And I think that as long as her plan allows it and you're following all the rules, go for it. It's great. It really is. Here's a question from Leonard, who seems to be writing in the last week of July about not receiving a stimulus check. The question is, how can I get those funds that other people have gotten who do the same job that I have? It has to do with your income. So, Leonard, if your income is too high, I don't know what else is going on in your life, you may not qualify for it, but you should, if you filed a tax return and you make less than $75,000, you should be able to qualify for it. And if not, maybe you make too much money. I don't know. Send me more details if you have further questions. Okay. When we return, it is going to be my conversation with Cal Newport. He's written all sorts of fantastic books. The one that I really love is Digital Minimalism. It's Jill on Money. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome back. It's Jill on Money. It's hour number 2, and we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Well, we've got a really great treat for you today, and that is author Cal Newport. Now, maybe you don't know about this guy, but I fell in love with him. He's written a bunch of books. The first one that I became familiar with is something called Deep Work. It was basically, how do you stay focused when there are so many distractions around? And a couple of years ago, he came in to talk about his follow-up book called Digital Minimalism, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. He really did change my whole view on this and on the idea of being focused and how to be more productive. So I hope you enjoy this interview. We're going to spend some time with Cal Newport. Stay tuned. You're going to like this one. What is the best financial or career decision you've ever made?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, probably the best career decision was all the way back as an undergrad. I was a computer science major and was trying to figure out, do I want to go into industry? So I had a job offer from Microsoft, so stock and good salary, or do I want to go to grad school? Very little salary, no stock options. But the idea I had was, if I go to grad school, I will have enough flexibility that I can keep writing books while continuing to do my computer science education.
That's interesting, because there was also a certain amount of, you could sort of have a nice steady stream of income if you kind of made it through and got on a tenure track, but also indulge your creative side and be really have excitement around that and find your passion. That's awesome.
Yeah, it worked out well. And also it gives you this balance. So if, let's say, the academic life is grinding you down, you can take some refuge in the writing. And then if you go through a stage when the writing's grinding you down, you can take some refuge in the academic. And I could bounce back and forth and sort of self-modulated.
That's great.
It worked.
I first became familiar with you when you wrote a book called Deep Work.
and it kind of blew my mind. So can you just outline a little bit of the thesis of deep work, and then maybe we can talk about how that may have led to your current new book, Digital Minimalism?
Well, they're definitely connected. So deep work, in some sense, was talking about some of the unexpected consequences of technology in the workplace. And the argument it was making is that we are undervaluing focus. So we're undervaluing what you get out of sustained concentration, and we were overvaluing convenience of, let's say, flexible communication or accessibility. And so the argument was, if you're an individual or organization that cultivates the ability to focus intensely during work, you would have this huge competitive advantage because almost no one else was doing it.
When you started writing that, what year was that about?
Probably 2014 is when I started to get serious in the research for that.
So already we had the iPhone out for 7 years. We have lots of different interruptions, but the focus part of that, we've always been interrupted by different things in our lives. I mean, email or the phone way back when.
Yep.
So what is it that you prescribe in deep work that you have found has really yielded great upside for people who need to focus?
Well, even the vocabulary was a big deal for a lot of people. The shallow work, which is the emails and the meetings and the putting together the PowerPoint slides, is different than the deep work, which is the sustained concentration. And that when you make the claim that it's the deep work that actually moves the needle, that's what actually is going to push you ahead in your career or going to raise the profit of the company. While the shallow work is just what keeps the lights on. It's the logistical work that keeps things going. And noting that those are two different things. So it's not just enough to say I'm busy, or that I work really hard, I was in the office all day, that you actually have to start thinking what type of work I'm doing. Just adding those terms to the efforts that people did in the office, I think really helped people rethink, okay, what am I actually doing here? Frenzy is not enough. You know, the actual type of activity matters, and focus is producing the value.
And what's interesting, I interviewed Daniel Pink, who wrote a book called When, and he talks about doing deep work at specific periods in the day, which may be different for every individual. Did you find that also?
It is different, but what they share in common is a commitment to having actual systems for how they schedule it and rituals surrounding the actual deep work, because it's actually really difficult. It's a big ask of the human brain to say, I want to give sustained attention, especially to something that's abstract or symbolic. Like this is a big ask. It's not something that you're going to feel like you're in the mood to do. It's not something that you easily slip into. So serious deep workers have these scheduling philosophies. This is when I do my deep work. Could be different between what you do or I do,
right?
But it's clear. And then they have these rituals that surround it. Okay, how do I coerce my brain into actually entering this mode of sustained concentration on something abstract? So that is really common.
And what do you do to drown out everything else? So you don't put your email on, you turn off your phone. What else?
Yeah, well, it's key in the definition of deep work that any distraction means it's no longer deep work. So even the quick glances, only every 15 minutes, still doesn't count. If you're looking at an inbox at all, if you're glancing at a phone at all, it doesn't count. So that's the hard and fast rule we have for deep work, is that it has to have zero distractions. Your attention needs to be on the one thing and only that one thing. You get into your sustained concentration. Because we have a lot of research that shows what kills you in concentration is not multitasking. It's the context switching. So even if you just context switch for a minute to look at an inbox, you're going to pay a cognitive price for a long time after that. And so we got the message maybe around 2010 or so that pure multitasking doesn't work. So if I'm on the phone and answering email while trying to write something difficult, I'm not doing any of them well. The subtle issue, though, is people now think they're single tasking because they only have, let's say, Microsoft Word open. For the most part, they're only working on that one hard thing, but they're doing these quick checks every 10 or 15 minutes.
Right. So if I check my phone while I'm writing my manuscript, I am really losing ground in that endeavor of deep work.
After you put the phone away, you continue to lose ground. And
How long?
Well, at least 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would say most knowledge workers go less than 10 to 15 minutes in between quick checks. And so they think they're single tasking because, literally speaking, they're not doing these things at the same time, except for in those quick moments that they're checking. But the attention residue cost, which is the term that comes out of the psychology literature, the attention residue, when you come back to the primary task, lasts for a while and reduces your cognitive output. And so that's why deep workers are so adamant that there can't be a single glance. And if you glance, the whole session no longer counts as deep work.
What?
Yeah.
The whole thing?
The whole thing.
Not even like that first half hour where you blew it?
No, if you've glanced in the last half hour, it doesn't count.
Okay, so let's use me as an example. Why not? I wake up very early. So I have to check my email because I'm in news, right? So I have to make sure nobody needs me to come on set or do anything. I do that very quickly. And then should I put an auto reply on my email at that point and basically say, I will not be checking email for the next 2 hours?
Or develop a ritual that the people who need to reach you know. I mean, something that's very common is you have some sort of emergency procedure. So, okay, here's my phone number. The people you work with know. If there's something breaking, you could call this phone or send a text message.
Right.
Otherwise, this is my writing time, and then I'll be back on it at whatever, right? Expectations are set. And people adjust pretty clearly. It turns out in the workplace that predictability is more important than accessibility, and we often get that wrong. What people need to know is, I know how and when I can reach you, and how that system works is more important than actually having 24 access to you.
We'll get back to our interview with Cal Newport in just a minute. If you have a financial question or maybe a comment about some of the things that Cal's talking about, send us an email. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. That's Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And today we've got a great guest. This is an interview we recorded a few years back, but I love this guy. His name is Cal Newport. And if you missed the first segment, go back and listen to the show. Go online to JillOnMoney.com. He's so great because we were able to talk about his previous book, which is called Deep Work. In this segment, we get into the brand new book. It's so cool. It's called Digital Minimalism. So I hope you enjoy this. This is the continuation of our interview with Cal Newport.
Do you think that autoresponder actually works or doesn't work?
I think it could be useful. Because it does give information about accessibility. I think in general, what I call communication rules are useful, which is having clarity. So for example, I don't have an autoresponder as an author, but I have a pretty clear set of communication rules on my website. Here's 4 different addresses. They each have different purposes. So use this address for this, that address for this. Here are the expectations about whether or not you should expect to hear from me or whether or not I'll read it. And so it's clarity. And you would worry, and a lot of writers, for example, might worry, well, that's going to upset my readers. But they don't seem that upset. Actually, what's more upsetting to readers is if you don't have that clarity. Say, I don't know, I see an email address, and so I had an expectation, an implicit expectation that you were going to respond, and you didn't. If you instead say, here's my address, I love to get XYZ, but I probably won't respond, people are okay. Like, great, right. I got it. I didn't expect a response, and so I'm not unhappy. And then when you do respond, when you see a good lead or something, people are way more happy than they would have been. They don't take it for granted.
That is great. So this work, Deep Work, was really popular. And what year was that published?
2016.
16. And here you are already with another new book out. And so basically you've lapped me 6 times. Isn't this your 6th book?
6th book, yeah.
And you now have lapped me 6 times, and you are a lot younger than I am. So what do I have to show for myself? Not a lot, I guess, huh?
Well, see, once you start deep working, though, we'll be
you
back
think?
here next year.
Who
You'll
knows?
get book 4. Yeah.
All right, there you go. Talk about what led you to digital minimalism, choosing a focused life. So there's your favorite word, focus, in a noisy world.
The readers of Deep Work were actually a big part of the initial push into this topic. So I was out there on the road. I was talking about it. This is a book about the workplace. Deep Work was about the workplace. And readers would come up to me and say, okay, maybe I buy this premise about what's going on in the workplace, but the real issue, the one that's literally keeping me up at night, is the impact of new technologies in my personal life. And there's something really interesting going on there, but also really different than what's happening in the workplace. In the workplace, we're talking about expectations with bosses. We're talking about email. We're talking about Slack. What was happening in people's personal lives was actually much different. And I had been noticing, because I'd written about these topics for a while, but I'd been noticing around that time, 2016, early 2017, that there'd been a shift in the way that people seemed to be talking about this. This shift from the self-deprecation, like, oh, I'm on my phone all the time, isn't it crazy, into actual unease, where people were starting to get fed up. People were actually looking for changes. This is not healthy. This is not sustainable. What's happening in my personal life? This message was so strong. I was receiving it so strongly. I felt like I had no option but to actually leave the world of business and dive into this particular topic. What's happening in our personal lives with technology?
And you were able to go out to your fan base and say, who wants to help me with this project, basically?
Yeah.
Talk about that experiment and what it yielded.
Well, so one of the things that became clear when I was working on the book is that if you're going to transition your digital personal life to something more sustainable, small tips, small changes, this wasn't going to get it done. Like, something more wholesale had to happen. I worked on a 30-day process that I thought could affect this rapid transformation, but I wanted to kick the tires on it. So I put out a note to my readers just on my email list saying, hey, is anyone willing to come along with me and do a 30-day experiment? You're going to have to step away from all the technology in your personal life. It's not going to be easy. And then send me reports about it. I thought that maybe 20 or so people would agree because it's a big ask. And then over 1,600 people ended up signing up.
That is a cry for help right there, isn't it? Like, Not only do I want to do this, but I really need you to help me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you said it around your personal life, because you make a distinction that part of this, look, there you have the deep work and some of the rules and the consistency around work life, which I get. Everybody has different expectations. If you work at some big law firm, and the client wants you, tough luck. Don't be a lawyer in this day and age if you don't want to be notified at late in the day, right?
Yeah.
But for your personal life, that's where you were having these feelings that came out that were, I think that people understood, like, I'm sort of, not like, maybe I'm not addicted, maybe I am addicted, but I have a tendency, an urge, something is drawing me back to this device, and I can't escape it. Can you just talk a little bit about the two issues, especially around social media, that draw you in?
Yeah, well, in some sense, the companies went too far, and that's part of what was creating this trend where people were going from self-deprecation to unease, is they got so good at getting you to look back at the phone, because, again, that's directly the activity that generates revenue for the company. You going back to the phone, using it, giving data, and allowing your data to be used to target advertisements at you, that's the business model. They got real serious about this business model around the time they started to think, how are we going to make this IPO a success? So Facebook in particular innovated a lot of what's bringing us to the phone. When the IPO was coming up, they were thinking, we have to get the revenue up. To get revenue up, we have to get user engagement minutes up. To get user engagement minutes up, we have to completely re-engineer the experience of social media. And we have to take it away from what is used to be, which is primarily you have a profile, other people maintain a profile, you check in on your friends' profiles, they sometimes check in on yours, and they re-engineered it to this experience where you're getting this steady stream of rewards coming at you through the app, like likes. We think like is fundamental to social media. It's not. That's a feature that's much more serving the interest of the companies than it is the users. Photo auto tagging, the quick comments that you could leave, the hearts on Instagram. This changed the experience of social media to one where you have constant rewards, social approval indicators about you coming in, which really led to this new relationship people had with their phones, which is this constant companion. I'm always clicking, which is different than it was before.
I love you said that the tech companies encourage behavioral addiction, intermittent positive reinforcement. That's the hearts, that's the likes, which you think should just be banned. Like, everyone should stop doing that immediately.
It's not a feature that was added because it made the user experience better. Those were features that were added because it quadrupled user engagement minutes.
That's incredible. And the drive for social approval, because we are social animals, right? And we do want that. Where is it that you see in the iteration of where we are today in social media, where you start to see the approval part of that?
Well, so the big shift was, instead of the static experience where maybe I read what's going on in your life, or maybe someone reads about what's going on in my life, they had to figure out how we give indications that people are paying attention to you. And so if I see there's likes, that literally means someone liked something I was doing. So if I tell you, like, here's an envelope, and in this envelope is something that someone was thinking about you, human nature makes it almost impossible not to open that envelope. Whereas if I say, hey, in this envelope there's something interesting or funny, you're like, oh, that's nice, maybe I'll get to that. But if I tell you, no, someone said something about you, I wrote it down, it's in that envelope, you're going to have to open it. And so the social media platforms figured out pretty quickly, we have to find these indicators of social approval. We have to make the stream of social approval indicators as rich as possible, because that's human psychology 101. It might be nice to see what my friend is up to, but I have to see what people are thinking about me.
Oh, my God. That is what got me off of social media right there, by the way.
The counts.
No, what people are like or
are they
dislike
liking
or
disliking?
dislike.
Yeah.
Because, so in my case, on Twitter or on, not so much on Facebook, but more like on Twitter, which is a cesspool.
Yeah.
I don't have a thick enough skin, I guess, but I really said I need to stop this. So Mark, the executive producer extraordinaire, kind of runs my social accounts, and he'll tell me if something I need to respond to, or he'll forward something to me that is important.
Yes.
And he'll say to me, this person's looking for you. They want a speaking engagement. Or I think your uncle's looking for you on Facebook. I am so much happier with Mark being my filter because it just hurt my feelings so much.
Yeah. Which, by the way, is the way I think news organizations should run, is there should be people who engage or monitor what's going on social media on behalf of the journalists, as opposed to this model that the journalists themselves should be constantly engaged in the social media. That also distracts you and it fragments your attention. It makes it very difficult to write the scripts or think through the story. And so I'm with you.
We'll get back to our interview with Cal Newport in just a minute. Hey, during the break, why don't you go to the website, JillOnMoney.com, and there you can subscribe to our sister broadcast. It's a podcast. Luckily, it's called Jill on Money, so it's not a lot to remember. Hop onto the website, JillOnMoney.com, or you can actually subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Stitcher, Spotify, Radio.com, Google Play, wherever you find podcasts. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are in the midst of an interview with Cal Newport. He is the author of Digital Minimalism, before that, Deep Work. But we're talking about this interview because I think it's so important. We're working from home. We're rebroadcasting this because there's so many distractions. It's difficult to sort of maintain your balance. And so in this part of our interview with Cal Newport, we're talking about the actual principles of digital minimalism, what you need to know. Again, this will make you more focused and more productive, and I think happier.
So now I want to talk about the principles of digital minimalism, starting with one of my favorite things, which is you quantify it and you say clutter is costly.
Yeah.
And explain that.
Right. Well, I mean, if we take a step back, what is minimalism asking you to do? What it's asking you to do essentially is wipe the slate clean of all of this haphazard junk that you've added into your personal digital life for arbitrary reasons. Wipe it clean, get rid of it all, and then carefully rebuild it from scratch. Except for when you rebuild it from scratch, you just put in the big ROI, the big wins, big ROI options, right? A selective, intentional use of technology that now you're choosing very specifically. This is going to help something I really value. This is going to help something I really value. This doesn't, so I'm going to ignore it, right? That's classic minimalism. Now, the question is, why does that work? Because it does mean that you have to miss out on things that could bring you some small value or convenience.
Right.
Like focusing on just the big wins, you're ignoring the small wins. So why do you end up net better off? Well, one of the reasons is this first principle is that the clutter itself has a big negative cost. And so we're used to this in the physical clutter space, that if I'm a hoarder, that so my house is overflowing with all this junk. It's true that if you point to any one thing in my house, I could give you some reason why I might need that newspaper from 1985.
Right.
Whatever, that was a good year, I might want to remember it. But obviously the overall negative cost of having my house be so overcluttered far outweighs even the sum of all those small pieces of value. Well, it's the same thing in your digital life. You have all these things on your phone. They're all clamoring for your attention. You have some explanation for each. Like, here's the reason why I downloaded that, or here's what I could do with this. But the overall negative cost of having your attention constantly being pulled at, constantly being manipulated, can far outweigh the sum of all those little benefits they bring you.
So the first thing I did after I read the book was I deleted all social media from my phone. And then I'm like, okay, not missing it at all. And what about if you find yourself really, it's like incapable. I have a lot of friends who are corporate people, and they say like, well, look, it's the expectation is that I have to check my phone all the time. And then once I check for work, I'm now then dragged into this other world. How can we help those folks?
Yeah, you have to try to break those bridges where you can. I mean, one of the things that's very common among almost any digital minimalist tech setup is that their phones are incredibly simplistic. They have very few things on their phone. They would never, for example, even if they had a need for social media, some specific thing for work or this or that, they would never have it on their phone because they don't want that portal, that always-on constant companion model. Digital minimalists are very old school in the ways that if they need to use Instagram or something like this, it's on their desktop at home, and they do it just occasionally, So they dumb down their phones a lot so that you've broken these bridges. So I have to go on there to check if I have an email from my law firm. Cannot easily then change into, and so as long as I'm here, I better see what the latest baseball trade rumors are. And now this guy really has it wrong, so I have to really let him know that he's completely undervaluing Bryce Harper. And then you go off and
now you're down that rabbit hole.
Now you're down the rabbit hole.
So
you got to fill in the rabbit holes, basically, and the phone is where most of them live.
So once you realize that you have that clutter is costly, you say that optimization is important. That is principle number 2 of digital minimalism. Can you explain that?
Right. So what minimalists do is after they make these intentional selections, this is the tech I'm going to use in my personal life. Here's the big win I want to get out of it. They don't stop at the binary question of what. They also ask how and when. And this is where they really start to get the big win. So they want to say, well, how am I going to use this technology and when am I going to use this technology? And so this is where you get these setups like I was just saying where, well, it's not on their phone. Maybe it's just on their desktop. And maybe they very severely curate their experience and they have schedules around it. And so like an example I give in the book is that I worked with a lot of visual artists who told me, okay, Instagram passes this test of this is important for something I really value because if you're a visual artist, you need to have a constant stream of creative input. That's the grist, right, into the mill of creative output. And Instagram is a great place for that because a lot of artists post images of their work. And so the minimalists who go through this process who are artists and say, okay, so I do need Instagram, when they do the how and the when question, they completely re-engineer their experience with Instagram. And so, for example, they'll often curate who they follow down to maybe, let's say, 10 artists. They'll take it off the phone. They'll put it on the desktop. They'll have a schedule, which is like, this is what I do Sunday morning. I spend 20 minutes to see what's been posted by these artists over the past week. They're getting 99% of the deep value out of the service, and now they're avoiding 99% of the cost. So that's the optimization piece of being a minimalist, and it really does help push you in the big win category.
And the thing that I thought was really cool is as you talk about going on your 30-day digital purge is that, obviously you're saying like don't go cold turkey and then bring it all back. It's really about thinking, what have I missed and what am I going to replace this with? I have always been a physical book person. And even, I tried a Kindle for 5 seconds and even an iPad, but I always like holding a physical book. And I think the reason I really like it is I feel like I'm immersed in it. And that when there's technology that's underlying it, then I can be distracted quite easily. What is it that people are bringing back into their lives that they hadn't thought about in a while that will help them bridge the gap between what they had and what they will have?
Well, analog leisure is a big part of what people rediscover when they do this 30-day declutter. And by the way, I use the term declutter very specifically instead of detox because to me it's this mystery, the way that the digital community has appropriated this term detox. It's a real perversion of the actual meaning of this term, right? It comes out of the substance abuse community where a detox was you break the sort of addictive compulsion to use something as the first step towards building a new life that doesn't have this in it anymore. And yet in the digital community, we have this weird notion of a detox where like, okay, here's the idea. We take a break and then go back to what we were doing before, which baffles people who are used to this term from before. And so I use the term declutter because it's not about taking a break. It's about completely changing. So during this 30-day process where you're away from basically all of these technologies before you rebuild your life, analog leisure is one of the big things that people report back to me.
We'll get back to Cal Newport in just a minute. During the break, here is a great idea. Go to the website, JillOnMoney.com. Sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Mark does it every week, and it's amazing. JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, she's all over the place. Go to JillOnMoney.com to find it all. Now back to the show with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And today we are rebroadcasting an interview that we conducted a few years back with academic and author Cal Newport. The guy is fascinating. And the reason why I started to become familiar with him is because he wrote a book called Deep Work. And I was really interested in how I could try to focus my time more efficiently. His follow-up book is called Digital Minimalism. And he was in the studio and we were able to interview him. Really an interesting guy. The thing that I find sort of fascinating about this guy is that he was able to take the experience of writing one book and turn it into another book, something I have yet to discover myself. So we are obviously distracted by so much in the digital world, but it may surprise you to learn that part of that distraction is also the distraction of the things that you love, especially the things you love to do right now, streaming and video games. So in this last part of our interview with Cal Newport, we're going to talk about all of those distractions and what you need to know to better manage them.
When you think about the minimalism, you also include not only YouTube, but streaming media. And I found that interesting because I was like, why is that? Because is that just because of the binging?
Yeah, actually, my readers are the ones who pushed that onto me. So when I did this original experiment, I had a list. Okay, here's what I mean by technologies in your personal life. And I didn't have streaming media on it. Because I don't know, to me, it was kind of confusing. Like, is it TV or not TV? I mean, we have it come through our TV, and it's sort of, I mean, it's not the same as TV. It's kind of the same thing. And I have 3 young kids. We don't watch a lot of TV. I mean, we don't have a lot of free time. So it didn't really occur to me. But the 2 pushbacks I got was, you need to add streaming media to it, and it was because of the binging. People were using this as a way to not have to actually engage with the world or themselves or their own thoughts. And then video games.
Oh,
that wasn't on my radar at all, but a lot of young men wrote in and said, that has to be on this list. So those are the 2 things that I learned are having a big effect in people's lives that I didn't even really realize about.
If you're not a binger, should you still strip that away?
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, my original rules is like, if you're someone like me, like my wife and I might watch 30 minutes of TV a night or something like that if we have time. I didn't see that as being particularly troublesome. But people who are younger than me, who had more downtime, let's say, that were filling it more with streaming media, they wanted the band-aid pulled off. Though I got a clever hack that I would say 4 or 5 different readers came up with the same thing, which is they had a rule about streaming media during this period where it wasn't that they couldn't watch it, but the rule was they could only watch it if they're with someone else.
Yeah, I noticed that there was like, if I'm by myself, I sort of fall prey to that urge to keep going.
Something.
Yeah.
But if I'm with someone else,
then it's just
this is like a social. I'm with someone else for watching a show. It's social. So I think that was a good compromise for a lot of people.
That's excellent. What about the group of these younger people who are prone to having more anxiety and that the suicide rate is up? And I'd heard that, but when I don't know why, it just struck me as I read it and the way you put it in context to me, so awful and depressing. And what can we do to actually snap out of that horrible downward spiral?
Well, the good news is there is a lot of pushback happening. I mean, essentially what has happened with that young generation, Generation Z, is that the data is starting to get so stark that it's now crossing into public health crisis territory. And now the signal is beginning stronger as the literature has become more robust, is that we are seeing a sharp rise in anxiety and anxiety-related disorders, as well as the corresponding hospitalizations for self-harm and suicide attempts, which is what tells us this is not a self-reporting effect among that generation. And it's a hockey stick graph. If you're looking at year born and incidents of these anxiety-related disorders, the corresponding hospitalizations, it's like right at this point that it became standard for someone who was young to have a smartphone. It really rises really, really fast.
I'm hoping that your book and more of the research that comes out is really going to prompt people to have these conversations. Although there was only one thing that I had a pain in my belly when you said it, which is, I walk my dogs a ton, so I'm out and I walk and it's great. But I think you don't approve of the fact that I listen to podcasts while I do that.
Well, I'm not anti-podcast, so you can definitely listen to podcasts, but the key is to have some times when you're not.
I know. That's what I'm going to do more.
Solitude.
Yes,
Time alone with your own thoughts. You don't have to always be alone with your own thoughts because then you're lonely. Ben Franklin wrote about this and went back and found it in his journals, right? He talked about solitude is crucial, But if you do too much of it, you're going to be very unhappy. So you can't do no solitude. If you're never alone with your own thoughts, it's problematic. On the other hand, if you're always alone with your own thoughts, like in solitary confinement, that's not so great either. So I give you dispensation
Some
to listen
podcasts.
to podcasts.
But I can cut down a little bit. I think that's okay. Okay. Cal Newport, before you leave, when we started, I said your best financial or career decision, you said was actually going to grad school, going into academia. What was your worst?
Oh, probably the amount of student loans I took out as an undergraduate. I didn't really think much about it.
No, why would you?
Yeah. Now, fortunately, this worked out okay. This book writing thing, I was able to pay those back. But yeah, I mean, it was so casual. I mean, it still is now, but it was so casual back then.
I know.
They're like, yeah, here's some money. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Right. And anyone could get it. And any kid could get it. Now any parent can get it.
Yeah.
Do you know the fastest growing segment of people who borrow for education are those over the age of 60?
Interested.
Does that blow your mind or what? I mean, the numbers aren't as big. It's just that the pace is insane.
There's so much money to be made there if you're the loan givers.
Yeah. And also, like, there's so many like broken hearts and terrible stories of people over 60 who are like, yeah, I wish I could retire.
Yeah.
Can't. Sorry.
Thanks so much to Cal Newport. We really appreciate him coming to the studio a few years back, and we appreciate you taking the time to listen to this interview. I encourage all of you to check out some of his books. Specifically, I've just loved Digital Minimalism. We'll have some links to Cal Newport's work. You're listening to Jill on Money. When we return, let's finish up with a question from one of you. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius Virtual Studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. Okay, last email of the show. This is from Michelle, who says, I'm 70 years old and recently had an energy bond in my Roth IRA default. Ugh. Is it possible to withdraw that from my Roth and move it to my non-retirement brokerage account and take the loss on my taxes? Thanks. Love all the great info that you provide every day. Oh, Michelle, if it were so easy. No, you cannot do this. I mean, the upside is that all the money that you've made in the account when you sell those assets is not subject to capital gains, but neither is the loss that you have. So just know that. I'm sorry. I know it's a bummer. So be it, right? You know, you just got to kind of take the good with the bad when it comes to the Roth account. Still worth having the Roth. I'm bummed that you had a bond default, though. That's not great. Okay, so remember, closing the show out, and we always like to thank everybody involved. Mostly, we want to thank you for listening. It's not always the case that we get a chance to really say how much we so appreciate every single one of you sending us your email questions. So please keep doing that. And if you feel like it's been a while and you sent something in, I know we got just completely trounced with emails. So we're still digging out. It's been really tough, but please keep sending us those questions. I think we're doing pretty well. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Go to the website, Jill on Money, and there you can see all the different things that we do. You can read columns that I write. You can listen to past shows. You can watch television appearances, and you can check out the resource section. Mark has done a fantastic, fantastic job with that resource section. Okay, remember, no matter what, it is the weekend. You might be seeing your friends. Wash your hands. Wear your masks. Maintain your physical distancing. Do something nice for somebody today. Okay, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.